Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thanks so much for watching. Hope everybody's doing well. So I didn't have a video out yesterday because I was recording with Stefan Molyneux, and we ended up going pretty long. We did about 2 hours, and so yeah, sorry I didn't get that video up. But if you want to go check that out, there's what I thought was a really great conversation between me and Stefan Molyneux. And yeah, it's up on his YouTube channel now, so go check that one out. We talked a lot about the immigration issue, which is what the topic of today's video is going to be about, the latest. I said in my last video I'll probably be doing more videos about this family separation stuff, and yeah, here we are, 2 days later, and it's already changed quite a bit. So Donald Trump signed an executive order to stop the family separations. This is a bit of a reversal, as he had been saying for the last few days that he can't do this through executive order and it has to be Congress. And by the way, it's still not clear that that's not true. If you actually look at the executive order, it seems that they need approval from a judge who had determined during the Obama administration that you can't keep children together with their parents while they're being detained. So we'll see what actually ends up happening, and whether this changes things. But I thought it was interesting that Trump signed this executive order, or had this executive order written and then signed it. And I'd imagine what motivated it. I have two guesses. The first, I guess the more obvious one, is the political. He was getting beat up for this, and as I said in my last video, it seemed pretty clear that the Democrats had found their issue that they wanted to run on in the midterms. And this is why, and you know, Republicans were freaking out about this a little bit, and I think this is part of the reason why Ted Cruz proposed a bill to end family separation, and why Chuck Schumer was not willing to talk about it. Because when it actually comes down to it, the Democrats don't want to solve an issue that they can win on in the midterms. They want to win on them in the midterms. And this was made pretty clear with the DACA recipients. So when, you know, if you remember, this was a few months ago in the Trump world, it feels like several decades ago, but just a few months ago, the Dreamers was the big moral crisis of our day, and the Democrats were up in arms, like this is the greatest travesty in American history. And Donald Trump offered them. He said, "I'll give you amnesty and a path to citizenship for 3 times the amount of DACA recipients that Obama offered amnesty to." And in exchange for that, I want some funding and a border wall. And the Democrats said no, because it doesn't help them politically to make that deal. I mean, first of all, you got in the midterm elections, it's all about turnout. So you got to gin up your base. And the hardcore base of the Democratic Party are driven by hatred of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is literally Hitler, according to them. So what's going to help you get those people out to the polls? Is it if you say, hey, we made a deal with literally Hitler, and it turns out the problem is largely solved. Or if you don't make a deal and you say, look at what literally Hitler is doing to all these dreamers, right? So that's the direction they wanted to go in. Same with this thing. The Democrats don't actually care about solving this problem. They don't seem to actually want to do something. I mean, if it's such a great moral travesty as the Democrats make it out to be, then wouldn't giving a little bit of border funding and a wall, why wouldn't that be worth ending it? I don't know. It seems the only answer there is the political. And it seemed like Donald Trump, for all the people who, think of Donald Trump as a buffoon, and I kind of understand why, because Donald Trump does, he comes off like a buffoon quite a bit. But the people who just want to say, Donald Trump's an idiot or he's a dummy, I mean, it's hard at this point. Listen, by the way, this is what I thought of Donald Trump to begin with. Okay, I remember when Donald Trump spoke at CPAC, I think it was in 2013, and he dissed Ron Paul, and he was saying, oh, Ron Paul can't ever win an election. And I was like, are you out of your mind? You know who could never win an election? This bozo, Donald Trump. But After seeing the empirical evidence of the last couple years, I had to admit I was wrong about that. And for all the people who just think Donald Trump's some dummy, I don't know how you could still at this point in time deny that this guy has some real political brilliance in him. And this is why he was able to take out 16 other Republican candidates. This is why he destroyed the two most powerful political families in the United States of America, the Bushes and the Clintons. Those are not easy defeats, and he tore right through them. So anyway, Donald Trump, in what I think was a politically brilliant move, has now largely made it, I wouldn't say he's taken the issue off the table, but he's made it much more difficult for the Democrats to run and win on the issue of family separation. And so there's obviously the political motivation. And then the second part, which I'm just speculating, but I do think that Donald Trump is moved by these images of kids crying and screaming out for their mothers, and I know people who hate Donald Trump think of him as like evil incarnate, but he's I think Donald Trump is a family man. I mean, say what you want about him, he's certainly not loyal to his wife, and he's been married several times, and he runs around with porn stars and stuff like that, but you have to admit it's kind of impressive that he's got his whole family around him. I mean, usually these super rich guys who have had multiple wives and are out cheating and stuff like that. Usually they'll have at least one kid who just openly hates them. And Donald Trump's kids are all very loyal. They're all involved in what he does. They were involved in his business. A lot of them now are involved in his presidency, and it seems to be fairly important to him. And when, just a few months ago, when he bombed the crap out of Syria, he did it a few months ago, and then he did it a year before that. And both times he had basically announced, look, we're getting out of Syria, regime changes in our business. We were there to fight ISIS, and ISIS is largely defeated, so we're pulling out. We'll be getting out really soon. And then they come and they show him pictures of these kids who were the victims of chemical attacks, and this persuades him to take action. So, I at least entertain the possibility that maybe that's part of what's motivating him here. I don't know. I don't know for sure, but I think that's at least plausible. So, anyway, it's not exactly clear what's going to happen with these people, with these families who have been separated. And I do think that it's actually going to probably take an act of Congress to clean this up completely. And of course, the Democrats are not willing to do it. The Republicans don't have enough. They don't have the 60 votes that they need in the Senate. And the Democrats, I just think it's, politically speaking, they're completely incentivized to not work with literally Hitler. And they need to have, and everybody, by the way, not just the Democrats, but the entire mainstream media. I mean, if you go all in, you put all your chips onto the table that this guy is reckless and dangerous, and he's going to get us into nuclear war, and the economy is going to tank, and all these different things that have been said about Donald Trump, not by fringe nuts, but by taking us into a recession is like Paul Krugman, like the #1 economist at the New York Times. When you put all your chips in on that, if things are just, kind of continuing along normally, or maybe even a little bit better than things had been going, that makes you look very, very bad. So they need there to be some great humanitarian crisis that they can blame Donald Trump for. Of course, anybody who actually looks into this stuff realizes this was a law put in place by Bill Clinton. A lot of this stuff was going on under Barack Obama. And even if you're going to blame Trump for it being ramped up with this zero tolerance stuff, this isn't something that's unique to Donald Trump. Anyway, I guess just some more thoughts along the lines of what I've had on this whole, the issue itself and what is the right or wrong way to look at this. I mean, look, I've been a libertarian for about 10 years now. And my biggest issue, aside from my #1 issue that I care about, has always been the wars, particularly in the Middle East, and our troop presence around the world, and the fact, that we slaughter Muslims by the hundreds of thousands, and people are making profits off this, and our soldiers are coming back, and if they don't die or get injured over there, they're committing suicide when they come back because of the stuff that they've seen, and in the process we've just destroyed nations left and right. And so that's always been my number one issue. But my number one domestic issue has always been the war on drugs. And the fact that we have, the largest prison population in the world, and that there's large amounts of nonviolent criminals in our prisons. And to me, it's just it's like it's 2018 slavery in the United States of America, and it is in all of these cases, or at least all of these cases where people have families. These guys are separated from their families. And it's really amazing to me that all of a sudden now it seems like the general public feels like for the first time ever the United States of America's government is separating people from their families. It's amazing how much they can overlook the police state that we already live in. How many tens of thousands of SWAT raids are there every year, right? That swatting is a thing now in America, right? All you got to do is make a phone call and get somebody you're pissed off at swatted. They don't even need to have any priors. There doesn't even need to be any reason. It's just like, oh, hey, we made a phone call, and now we'll send in a SWAT team to go, break down somebody's door with a no-knock raid and shoot your dog if you're lucky, maybe kill your baby. So it's kind of crazy that I'm not quite sure why when it happens to Mexicans crossing the border, it deserves, it's not like 5 or 10 times as much outrage. It's like 100,000 times as much outrage as what we already do to tons of American citizens. Now, as I've said before in the last video, I am a libertarian, and I would like to live in a world where there's basically freedom of movement in the same way that me or you have freedom of movement. I'd like moving from Mexico to Texas to be no different than moving from New York to New Jersey. In general, you have to get a place and go and get a job, and you can move, no problem. But in this state of society that we live in, that is not really possible. And pretty much everyone recognizes that we can't have just unlimited immigration. We can't just say anybody in the world can come here and get on the dole and live at the taxpayer expense. So I guess, again, I would reiterate, the question to Democrats and to everybody outraged by this separation policy, it's like, what is the number? What is the number of immigrants that we need to let into this country? Because we already let in more than any other country in the world does, right? Doesn't there have to be some limit? Or is your position actually that we should have complete open borders and there should be absolutely no limit to who comes in? Because if you have any type of limit, so maybe instead of 1 million, we let in 2 million a year, okay? 3 million, 4 million, whatever your limit is. What do we do with the other ones that come in illegally after that? Because one way or the other, you're going to have to use some type of state aggression against them. And it's not going to be pretty. By the way, it's not pretty. It's what the whole statist system is predicated upon, is the initiation of force. This is how they get people to pay their taxes. This is how they get people to obey every one of their goofy rules. Okay? It's the threat that you can be thrown in a cage and, yes, separated from your family. Now, my biggest problem, and I think this could be handled peacefully in a libertarian world, but one of the major problems that I have with the idea that we would just there would be no limit to how many immigrants we take in is the issue of culture. And I've come to care about this more and more over the last few years. But I'm not one of these people who believes that fundamentally race is what really matters. But I do fundamentally believe that culture is very, very important. And I think that this is a big part of the reason why America looks like America and, Mexico looks like Mexico. And some of these other countries are doing worse than Mexico. And I wonder, I have no problem with people who assimilate into our culture. But, culture is very, very important. If you look at North Korea and South Korea, they're genetically indistinguishable. But one of them has like skyscrapers and business and food. And the other one has babies starving to death. So, and that's the difference is their culture and their political system. So if we're going in the direction that we're going in right now, which is a state that's ever expanding, and I don't know if you've checked around the culture, but we're not doing very well right now. The American people are kind of at each other's throats, and both sides seem to be dug into believing that the other side is pure evil. So how is this going to work if we're just importing millions of people from a completely different culture with no pressure to assimilate, no pressure to stay off welfare? How does this work out? That's a genuine question. That's what I'm wondering. And again, I hate seeing families separated. I'm glad Trump signed this executive order. We'll see exactly what it ends up doing. But I think the issue is a fairly complex one, and we'll see. We'll see how this plays out. I do think Trump did something to help himself politically here. Hopefully, it also actually has a humanitarian benefit to it as well. All right, I'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. with a brand new video. I got Owen Benjamin coming on the podcast tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. It's part of the problem. GasDigitalNetwork.com. All right, later.